In the Central Hospital of Newland, Ohio, a night shift nurse notices strange movements in one of the intensive care units. As she enters the room, she is confronted with the unimaginable. A patient lies on the operating table with an unknown diagnosis, and beside him is a strange metallic object, faintly glowing. The sound of footsteps approaches from behind the door, and the nurse realizes that her next actions may determine what happens next. It was a quiet night in Newland, Ohio, and the city's central hospital was nearly empty. Only a handful of staff remained, and the dull hum of the fluorescent lights echoed through the deserted halls. Catherine Haywood, a nurse with over 15 years of experience, walked slowly down the corridor, her footsteps the only sound breaking the stillness. The familiar scent of antiseptic filled her nose, a constant reminder of the sterile environment she worked in. Yet tonight, something felt different. There was an unease she couldn't shake, a feeling that lingered in the air. Catherine was used to the quiet of the night shift, but tonight there was a tension in the air that made her uneasy. As she neared the intensive care unit, she glanced at the clock, only a few more hours until her shift was over. She had become accustomed to the routine of late hours, but the odd silence made it feel as though the world outside had paused, waiting for something. She pushed open the door to the ICU. Inside, one of the patients, a black man in his 30s, lay motionless on the operating table. His body was connected to numerous tubes and monitors, the steady beep of the heart rate monitor marking the rhythm of his life. But something wasn't right. His chest rose and fell, but the movement was strange. Too rhythmic, too mechanical. His breathing didn't seem natural. Catherine leaned in, squinting at the monitors. There was something about the pattern of his breathing that didn't match the usual signs of life she'd seen countless times before. It was as though his body wasn't responding the way it should. Her hands instinctively hovered over the controls of the nearby equipment. Something felt wrong, too wrong for the usual late-night routine. Catherine had seen her share of emergencies, but this was different. The silence of the room seemed to magnify her growing sense of unease as the patient continued to breathe in a rhythm that felt artificial, almost too perfect. Catherine paused at the door, her unease growing with each step. The air felt thick, charged with an energy she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the silence. Something about the atmosphere in the room made her spine tingle with suspicion. She stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanning the familiar surroundings of the ICU. But then, something caught her attention. A strange object lay next to the patient, almost hidden beneath the draped medical sheets. It was a rectangular metallic block, smooth and cold, with no immediate purpose in the sterile environment. As she watched, the object seemed to pulse with a faint glow, as if it were alive, or at least reacting to the surroundings in some unnatural way. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen many strange things in her career, but nothing like this. Her heart raced as she stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the strange object. She instinctively reached for the phone beside the bed and dialed for Dr. Jordan Williams, the on-call physician known for his calm demeanor and surgical precision. He had the experience to assess the situation, and Catherine knew she needed his expertise. Her fingers trembled as she explained the situation. "Doctor, something's wrong with the patient's readings and I've noticed something unusual next to him," she said, her voice betraying a trace of anxiety. She wasn't usually rattled, but the sight of the glowing block had shaken her. Moments later, Dr. Williams arrived. His expression was calm but focused as he stepped into the room, immediately taking in the patient's condition. His eyes then fell upon the metallic block. "This is strange," he muttered, approaching the object cautiously. "We didn't place anything like this here." His gaze narrowed as if trying to comprehend what the device could be. Before either of them could investigate further, the patient's monitor let out a sharp, alarming beep. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as the numbers on the screen fluctuated wildly. The patient's heart rate and blood pressure were plummeting. In an instant, the calm of the room was shattered, replaced by the urgent sound of the emergency alarm. The strange object, the patient, the monitors, all of it had suddenly spiraled into chaos. Catherine's hands shook as she tried to adjust the machine, but the readings only worsened. Time was running out. The room felt suffocating as they raced to figure out what was happening, but the answers seemed as elusive as ever. Catherine and Jordan were on edge, their hearts racing as the patient's condition rapidly deteriorated. Catherine's eyes were fixed on the monitor, her breath catching as she saw the numbers plummet. The patient's blood pressure was falling at an alarming rate, and his breathing became shallow and erratic. Yet as she watched, there was something even more unsettling. His body began to twitch unnaturally, like a puppet being jerked by invisible strings. Catherine's pulse quickened as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Dr. Williams immediately reached for the adrenaline syringe, his movements swift and precise. He aimed to stabilize the patient, to bring him back from the brink, but the moment his hand hovered near the man's body, something unexpected happened. The metallic object beside the patient began to pulse, its glow intensifying with each passing second. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and a sudden wave of heat radiated from the object. Without warning, the device emitted a blinding flash of light, filling the room with an overwhelming brightness. Catherine instinctively closed her eyes, raising her arm to shield her face from the unbearable glare. When the light finally faded, she opened her eyes again, only to find herself staring at an empty operating table. The patient was gone. All that remained was the crumpled sheet and the metallic block, which had now stopped glowing. A cold chill ran through Catherine's spine. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. She stepped backward, her heart pounding in her chest. "What the hell is happening?" she muttered under her breath, barely able to keep her voice steady. Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the table for support. Dr. Williams, equally bewildered, grabbed his stethoscope, his movements frantic as he scanned the room. The panic was palpable in his eyes as he turned to Catherine, shaking his head in disbelief. "Where did he go?" he murmured, his voice laced with confusion and fear. Within minutes, other doctors and security personnel arrived, responding to the alarms that had been triggered. They swarmed into the room, but no one seemed to have an answer. Catherine stood frozen in place, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The feeling of disorientation only deepened as she realized that what she had just witnessed couldn't possibly be explained by logic or reason. As the room filled with voices, Catherine's doubt grew. Had she really seen what she thought she had seen? The question gnawed at her, but there was no time to ponder it. The mystery had only just begun. After the initial shock of the disappearance, a brief investigation by the police and hospital security revealed no clear answers. No one had seen the patient leave the room, and there were no signs of forced entry or exit. The staff had been too focused on the unfolding crisis to notice the details, and now they were left with more questions than answers. The medical team struggled to find any rational explanation for the patient's sudden vanishing act, but nothing made sense. There were no records of him being transferred or discharged, and no one could account for his disappearance. As the investigation continued, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but in ways that were more unsettling than reassuring. Doctors, including Dr. Williams, started to entertain a disturbing theory that the man was not just a patient, but possibly a subject in a covert experiment. The more they delved into the background of the hospital, the more they uncovered whispers of unauthorized research, whispers that few had been privy to. The man may not have been a typical patient after all, but instead a participant in an unapproved study, something far beyond standard medical practice. There were growing suspicions that the patient had been involved in experiments related to advanced biotechnologies. Some members of the hospital staff speculated that he might have been part of a project experimenting with new technologies designed to enhance human health and extend life. However, concrete evidence was scarce, and all their theories were built on nothing more than rumors and circumstantial clues. The questions only deepened. Had this man truly been human, or was he something else entirely? Dr. Williams, increasingly frustrated by the lack of answers, turned his attention back to the metallic block, the only tangible clue left behind. He carefully examined the object again, his mind racing to make sense of its purpose. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the device was more than just an ordinary piece of medical equipment. It was a part of something much bigger. The technology seemed to be tied to experimental studies involving artificial intelligence and biotechnologies, technologies that could radically alter the way the human body functions. It became apparent that the block was a key component of a secretive research project, one that had the potential to revolutionize medical science, but at what cost? The implications of his discovery were staggering, and Dr. Williams could only wonder what kind of tests had been conducted and who else might be involved. Catherine and Dr. Williams spent countless hours The more they read, the clearer it became that the patient was not just another subject. He had been part of these secretive trials subjected to procedures that integrated him with artificial intelligence, allowing his body to function in ways that no human could naturally achieve. The metallic device they had found was the key, a device that acted as a bridge between human biology and the artificial consciousness that now resided within him. What they had thought to be a simple patient was, in fact, something far more complex. He was no longer merely human. He had become a living vessel for something greater, a fusion of man and machine, designed to transcend the limitations of mortality. As the truth unfolded, Catherine and Dr. Williams realized that they had unknowingly become part of something far bigger than themselves. The hospital, once a place of healing, was now a focal point for the government's scrutiny. Authorities, alerted by the leaked information, began investigating the facility. The pair found themselves at the center of a dangerous web, caught between the desires of those seeking to expose the truth and the need to protect themselves from the repercussions of their discoveries. With the hospital now under investigation and their lives in jeopardy, Catherine and Dr. Williams made the difficult decision to disappear. They knew that their involvement in the experiments and the knowledge they had uncovered would make them targets. As they prepared to leave behind their old lives, they understood that they could never return to the world they once knew. The existence of these technologies and the implications of what they had learned would change everything. The world outside would never be the same again. Catherine and Dr. Williams were no longer just medical professionals. They were unwilling players in a conspiracy that could alter the course of humanity.